Number 25. Read the mast and hunt the white oaks. The old Appalachian hunter didn't wander the woods hoping to cross a deer. He hunted the deer's stomach. He knew that in autumn the whole forest moves to wherever the nuts are falling, what the mountain folk called the mast. For generations, the king of that mast was the American chestnut, a tree so vast it made up around 25% of the entire Appalachian forest canopy. Then in 1904, a blight arrived, and within about 40 years, it killed an estimated 4 billion chestnut trees, and the game had to find new tables. So the old-timers learned the oaks. They knew deer will walk past a red oak to get to a white oak, because the white oak acorn carries far less bitter tannin. Find a white oak dropping in October, and you've found your deer. Number 24. The live decoy and the stool pigeon. Here's a trick so old the language still carries it. Long ago, hunters would tie a live bird to a small stool or perch to lure whole flocks down out of the sky, and that bird was called the stool pigeon, a phrase we still use today. The target was the passenger pigeon, a bird that once darkened the skies in flocks numbering 3 to 5 billion, more than any other bird in North America. Market hunters used live decoys, nets, and fire to slaughter them by the wagon load, and they wiped out a species that had seemed endless. The very last passenger pigeon on Earth, a hen named Martha, died in a zoo on September 1st, 1914. The live decoy was deadly. It was also a warning we should have heard. Number 23. Hunt the wind and kill your scent. A modern hunter buys sprays and special suits. The old mountain man understood the one thing that has never changed. A white-tailed deer lives and dies by its nose, and that nose is almost beyond belief. A deer carries roughly 297 million scent receptors inside its head. A man has only about 5 million. So, the old hunter never, ever walked with the wind at his back. He approached every stand, every ridge, every bedding area, with the breeze blowing into his own face, carrying his smell away behind him. He rubbed himself with wood smoke and crushed pennyroyal and walnut hulls to bury his scent in the smell of the forest itself. No gadget ever beats simply staying downwind. Number 22. Hunt the rut and learn to rattle. There is one short window each year when even an old wise buck loses his caution, and the woodsmen built their whole season around it. Across most of Appalachia, the whitetail rut peaks in the middle of November, driven by a roughly 28-day breeding cycle. In that window, bucks fight, and the old hunters used it against them. They would take a pair of shed antlers and clash and grind them together to imitate two bucks battling over a doe, then sit back as a jealous buck came storming in to investigate. They also knew about the so-called second rut in late December, when does that didn't breed cycle again, and gave a patient man one last chance. Number 21. The wingbone turkey yelper. Before plastic and latex, a hunter called turkeys with the turkey itself. The wingbone yelper is made from the 3 hollow bones of a wild turkey's own wing, cleaned out and fitted together into a small trumpet, and you call it by kissing and sucking air through the tip. This is not some recent gimmick. Archaeologists have dated wingbone calls back between 4,000 and 6,500 years, and one of the oldest ever found was pulled from a rock shelter right in Tennessee. The mountain hunters learned it from the native peoples who perfected it over those thousands of years. A wing bone in skilled hands still fools a wary old gobbler today, because it sounds like exactly what it is: a real bird. Number 20. Roost the gobbler at dusk and dawn. A turkey hunter who finds his bird the night before is halfway to filling his tag. The old-timers knew that wild turkeys fly up to roost in the same trees at dusk and gobble hard at sudden loud sounds, what hunters call a shock gobble. So at last light, they'd slip near the roost and hoot like a barred owl, and a tom would gobble back and give away his bedroom for the morning. Then before dawn, they'd be waiting close by. It mattered, because the spring gobbler season accounts for roughly 80% of all the wild turkeys taken in a year. Locate him at dark, and you own the sunrise. Number 19. The Plot Hound and the Big Game Dog. In the southern mountains, a man's hunting was only as good as his dog's, and Appalachia produced one of the greatest hunting breeds in American history. In 1750, a 16-year-old German immigrant named Johannes Plott, later called George, stepped off a ship into North Carolina carrying 5 tough Hanoverian hounds. His family bred those dogs in the western North Carolina mountains for the next 2 centuries into the Plott Hound, a brindle-coated dog with the grit to bay a 300-pound bear or a wild boar and never quit. It became the official state dog of North Carolina in 1989. A good pack could tree a bear, corner a boar, or run a coon all night, doing work no single hunter ever could alone. Number 18. Tree the Coon by Lantern Light. Night hunting was its own world, and for generations the raccoon was both sport and paycheck. A man would turn his hounds loose after dark, follow their voices through the timber by the light of a carbide or oil lantern, and wait for the change in their bark that meant they'd treed. The reason wasn't only meat. In the fur boom of the 1920s, when the raccoon coat became a national fashion craze on college campuses, a single good coon pelt could be worth real money to a mountain family with little of it. Coon hunting taught a man to trust his ears, read his dogs, and move through black timber he couldn't see. Number 17. Find the mineral lick. The old hunters knew that a deer's body craves salt and minerals, especially in spring and summer, and that game would travel miles and return again and again to a natural seep where those minerals reach the surface. These mineral licks, or salt licks, were such reliable killing spots that whole settlements and trails were named for them. A woodsman who located a natural lick had found a place the deer simply could not stay away from. It's worth saying plainly, because times have changed. Hunting over bait or man-made mineral sites is now illegal in many states, most of those bans coming in the 20th century. So this is mountain history, not modern advice. Number 16. Fire hunting and shining the eyes. This one is pure, forbidden history. Long ago, hunters discovered that a deer freezes and its eyes glow when caught in sudden light, and they used torches, then lanterns, then headlamps to shine deer in the dark and shoot them where they stood. They called it fire hunting or jacklighting. It was deadly, it was easy, and it was so destructive to the herds that by the early 1900s, nearly every state in the country had outlawed taking deer by artificial light. It's a felony in most places today. The old-timers did it to feed families in hungry times, but it's one tradition the law put a hard stop to, and for good reason. Number 15. The Figure 4 Deadfall. For small game and fur, the mountain folk leaned on traps that cost nothing but a knife and an afternoon. The classic was the Figure 4 Deadfall, 3 notched sticks set in the shape of a number 4 that propped up a heavy flat rock or log over a baited trigger. When the animal nudged the bait, the whole thing collapsed and did the work, while the trapper was miles away running his other sets. The design is thousands of years old and spread across nearly every culture on Earth. But understand, the market hunting and unregulated trapping it once fed was shut down by laws like the Lacey Act of 1900. So today, this is a primitive skill to know, not a legal way to take game. Number 14. The Snare and the Lesson It Taught. A loop of wire or twisted cord set on a game trail was the simplest trap a man could carry. And for the market hunters of the 1800s, snares and nets emptied the woods. And the woods did empty. By around 1900, white-tailed deer had crashed from tens of millions down to roughly 500,000 animals in the entire country, a collapse of nearly 99%, and in many states the deer were simply gone. That catastrophe is what finally forced America to act, with laws like the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918 ending the slaughter. Thanks to those laws and hunter-funded restoration, the deer climbed back to around 30 million today. The snare fed people, but it also nearly finished the game forever. Number 13. Brain tan the hide. Nothing went to waste in the mountains, and the deer that fed the family also clothed it. The old-timers lived by a saying that sounds like a riddle but is simple chemistry. Every animal is born with just enough brain to tan its own hide. The natural oils in an animal's brain, worked into a scraped and softened skin and then smoked, turn a stiff raw hide into soft, durable buckskin for moccasins, shirts, and gloves. This is not a frontier novelty. People have hunted and brain-tanned deer across this land for more than 10,000 years. A man who could turn a hide into leather turned one deer into meat, clothing, and trade goods all at once. Number 12. Read the barometer. Long before anybody owned a weather app, the old hunters could feel a change coming in their bones and their joints, and they knew exactly what it meant for the game. Animals move hardest right before a storm front pushes through, feeding heavily while the air pressure drops, and then they hunker down once the weather hits. The woodsman learned that deer movement tends to peak when the barometric pressure sits in that falling range of about 29.8 to 30.2 inches. So the savviest among them didn't hunt by the calendar. They hunted the sky, hitting the woods hard in those restless hours just ahead of a cold front, when every animal in the mountains was up and on its feet. Number 11. Age the track and read the sign. Any fool can see a deer track. The old hunter could tell you how old it was and where the animal was headed. A whitetail's heart-shaped track runs roughly 2 to 3 inches long, and a big splay-toed track meant a heavy buck. But the real skill was in aging it. Fresh sign has sharp, clean, moist edges. Within a day, those edges dry, crumble, and fill with wind-blown debris, and a track in mudskins over as it sits. He read the same way in droppings, in fresh-bitten browse, in a bent blade of grass still wet underneath. Tracking told him not just that a deer had passed, but whether it was worth following right now. Number 10. Call the predator with a dying rabbit. The mountain men didn't only call the game they ate, they called the killers too. A fox, a bobcat, or a coyote can't resist the scream of an injured rabbit, so the old hunters learned to make that pitiful, raspy distress cry with their own voice, or a simple call, and bring a sharp-eyed predator running into range. There was money in it. Across much of the country, states paid bounties on foxes, bobcats, and wolves well into the 1960s, and a good predator caller could turn a winter night into cash and protect the henhouse. Besides, calling a wary predator into gun range is one of the hardest, most thrilling skills in all of hunting. Number 9. Make your own call by hand. Before a man could drive to a store and buy a call off a peg, he made his own, and he made it from whatever the woods gave him. He would squeak like a feeding squirrel by kissing the back of his own wet knuckle. He would stretch a single blade of grass or a green leaf between his thumbs and blow across it to scream like a rabbit or a fawn. He would carve a crow call from a hollow reed and a turkey yelper from a wing bone or a piece of slate. Remember, the first commercial turkey box call wasn't even patented until 1897. For all the centuries before that, every sound a hunter made to fool an animal came out of his own hands and his own throat. Number 8. The deer drive. Some game was taken not by one silent man, but by many working as one. In the deer drive, a method recorded here since the colonial days of the 1600s and used by native peoples long before, a small group of hunters called drivers would spread out and walk slowly through a thicket or hollow, deliberately pushing the deer ahead of them. Waiting dead still on the far side, at the trails and gaps and saddles the deer were sure to use, sat the standers. It took knowledge of the land and total trust between men, but a well-run drive could move game out of country too thick to still hunt. It was hunting as a community, the way whole mountain families once put meat on the table together. Number 7. The patched round ball. Here's a piece of forgotten genius that made the frontier rifle deadly. A bear-lead ball that fit the barrel loosely rattled out wild and inaccurate. So, the frontiersman wrapped his ball in a small patch of greased linen or thin tan deerskin before he rammed it home. That patch did two things. It sealed the bore, so none of the powder's force leaked past, and it gripped the spiral rifling, so the ball spun out true and stable. The grease, often just spit or bear fat, also kept the black powder fouling soft for the next shot. That humble cloth patch is the small secret behind every tale of frontier marksmanship you've ever heard. Number 6. Shoot small and save your lead. Out on the frontier, a man might carry every ounce of lead he owned for weeks at a time, with no store for 100 miles, so he learned to make it last. While the army hauled heavy muskets firing a fat ball of around 69 to 75 caliber, the mountain rifleman shot a small ball, often as little as 32 to 45 caliber. That smaller bore meant he could cast 2 or 3 times as many balls from a single pound of precious lead. It meant less powder burned per shot, less weight to carry, and far less meat destroyed on small game. Frugality wasn't a virtue out there, it was survival, and the rifle was built around it. Number 5. The Kentucky Long Rifle. The single greatest tool the Appalachian hunter ever carried was the long rifle, and it was an American invention. German and Swiss gunsmiths who settled in Pennsylvania in the early 1700s. One surviving rifle is marked 1704, took the short, fat European hunting gun and stretched its barrel long and bored it small and true. They called it the Pennsylvania, or later the Kentucky, long rifle, where a smoothbore musket was a coin toss past 60 yards. A skilled man with a long rifle could kill cleanly at over 200 yards. That rifle let a lone hunter feed a family, defend a cabin, and reach across a mountain holler with one carefully aimed shot. It is the gun that put meat on Appalachian tables for nearly 200 years. Number 4. Still hunting, the lost master skill. This is the one that separates the old woodsman from the modern hunter more than any other, and it's the one most thoroughly lost. Still hunting doesn't mean sitting still. It means moving through the woods so slowly and so quietly that you become part of them. The old hunter would take 2 or 3 soft steps, then stop and stand for long minutes, reading every shadow and shape, always easing into the wind, hunting the deer in its own bed before it ever knew a man was near. It demanded patience most people simply no longer have. And remember, this was the only way, because the portable climbing tree stand most modern hunters rely on didn't even arrive until the 1950s. For all the centuries before that, a hunter hunted on his own 2 feet. Number 3. Trail the blood and read the wound. Taking the shot is only half the job. An ethical hunter has to find what he hit, and the old-timers could read a blood trail like a page of print. Bright, pinkish, frothy blood with tiny bubbles meant a lung hit, and a deer that would pile up within 100 yards or so. Dark red blood meant the liver or the muscle, and blood mixed with stomach matter meant a gut shot, the hardest of all, where the rule was to back out quietly and wait a good 30 minutes or more before following, so the animal would lie down and expire instead of running for miles. They read the height of blood on the brush to know where the animal was hit, and they never, ever gave up on a wounded deer. That was a matter of honor. Number 2. Field dress fast and cool the meat. A deer on the ground is not yet meat in the pot, and the old hunters knew that the clock started the instant the animal fell. They field dressed it within minutes, opening it up and pulling the warm innards to let the body heat escape, because meat that stays warm spoils fast. Anything above about 40 degrees, and bacteria go to work. In cool mountain weather, they would hang and age it. To keep meat through the year with no refrigerator, they turned to the 2 oldest preservatives on earth, salt and smoke, slicing the meat thin and drying it into jerky that pulls out most of the water and will keep for months. Knowing how to save every pound of that meat was every bit as important as the shot that earned it. Number 1. Barking the squirrel. And the number 1 forgotten skill, the one that says everything about the old Appalachian hunter, is barking a squirrel. With a big-bored muzzle loader, a direct hit would simply blow a small squirrel to pieces and ruin the meat. So, the finer marksmen did something almost unbelievable. They aimed not at the squirrel at all, but at the bark of the limb directly beneath it, and the concussion of that ball smashing the wood would kill the squirrel stone dead and send it tumbling without a single pellet touching the meat. Better still, the lead ball stayed buried in the tree, where a thrifty man could later dig it out and melt it down to shoot again. This is not a legend. The famous naturalist John James Audubon personally watched the frontiersman Daniel Boone bark squirrels in Kentucky, and he wrote it down in a memoir published in 1870. 1 shot, perfect meat, and your lead back. That is mountain hunting at its absolute finest. So now I'll turn it over to you. Which of these old skills did your father or your grandfather teach you? And which ones have you actually done yourself? Did you ever bark a squirrel, run a coon hound through the dark, or still hunt a buck on your own 2 feet, the way the old-timers did? Tell me down in the comments which mountain skill you think we can't afford to let die, and where your people did their hunting. Let's pass these down together before they're gone for good.